Are we all here?
Pipe leaving the tank to the D box was crushed and offset. It was still working. The D box was shot.
Folks, we'll try to get started here.
And I said, this is what
All the confusion of the day moved on.
You got it?
Time is... Got my talkers down there? Hey. Thanks everybody for coming out to this morning's meeting. This is meeting 525 of the Lake George Park Commission being held this morning at Bolton Town Hall in downtown Bolton Landing. And we apologize for being a little late, a little disorganized, but I don't know what happened, but it did. Any introductions to be made? I don't see. Approval of meeting minutes and fiscal actions report for April 2023. The meeting minutes first.
So moved.
Second.
Moved to second. Any discussion? Hearing none. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Abstain?
no nays?
I wasn't there.
I'm sorry?
I wasn't there for April, so I abstained. Is that correct?
You would like to abstain from that? One abstention. Approval for fiscal actions report for April 2023.
So moved.
Motion made.
Second.
Second. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Hearing no
Also abstain.
nays and the same abstention. Thank you. Project review actions report. Mr. Stanek is still out with his leg surgery, I believe. Does anybody have the motion? Can read it for me?
Should be right in here.
Resolution 2023-13. I may have it.
It's in your folder, Ken, under tab 3.
I got it. Why don't I read it? I got it right in front of me. Resolution 2023-13. Whereas the Commission has received and reviewed the project review actions report prepared by the staff and dated 5/24/2023, and whereas the Project Review Committee recommends acceptance of the Project Review Actions Report. Now therefore be it resolved that the Commission directs that the Project Review Actions Report be incorporated in the minutes of the full Commission meeting, and that would be a motion.
Second.
Motion's made and seconded. Any discussion on it? Hearing none. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any objections to it? Okay. What did I do? Oh, there's my agenda. Do it right away. Dock modification submitted by Jeffrey and Diane McMullen, Town of Fort Anne, Washington County. Jason, can you lead us into that, please?
Sure. So I'll be directing this project today. So this project is for the modification of existing U-shaped dock, it's the construction of additional 2 docks and 3 boat lifts and 2 PWC lifts. The subject parcel is on 3355 Travis Point Bay, located in the mouth of Echo Bay. It is 370 feet of contiguous lakefront, which per the regulations allows for 3 docks of T, F, L, U, or straight piers, or 2 V-shaped docks. Currently, the property features a 37 by 32 feet F-shaped dock and wood-sided boathouse, which was registered as an existing wharf in 1981 by number 1774-1775. The modification entails removing this dock and the construction of this new complex and enclosed-sided boathouse, equipped with 5 vessel lifts, 3 for boats and 2 PWCs. The proposed structure consists of a total of 3 docks, 1 T-shaped and 2 U-shaped, with a combined footprint measuring 45.5 feet along shore, 80 feet wide outward, or excuse me, 80 feet along shore, 45.5 feet lakeward. The proposed new structure will be 4 feet taller and extend 7 feet further to the lake from the existing dock. 6 feet of the length outward will be 5 piers and 1 foot 5 feet. Concerns were raised by the eastern neighbor in opposition to the project. They claim that the expanded footprint and enclosed size of the proposed structure would negatively impact their western view shed. Staff visited the site with Chairman Parker and Commissioner Lombard on Tuesday, May 23rd. They can speak to that visit. As part of the documentation, I've also included site photos taken during our visit, staff visual analysis on page 10 to 20. Additionally, the applicant's agent and dock builder have additionally shared the findings of fact and conclusions of law from the neighboring property owners' clients from their boathouse application in 2003, which was denied at the time for context in your review. To simplify the matters, I summarized the key points of that findings of fact document into a memo on page 21 for a quick review. There's no jurisdiction claim by DEC, APA, or the town. Today we have Mike Sagaloli of the dock operators and Jennifer Klein of the neighbor with comments, and they'll be happy to speak about this when time comes up. So I can answer things technically about the application and specifics on the project. I would lean into that and comment.
Thank you. Would you like to speak to your project?
Sure, definitely. Thank you all, as always, for being part of the committee and commissioner board here and spending your time. As Jason mentioned, basically applying for a modification to an existing dock structure and sun deck structure, all within the current regulations with respect to lake frontage shapes. Actually quite a bit smaller than it could be. Being total of 2,100 square feet, we're nowhere near that as far as our 3 shapes total. Currently, there is a sun deck on the eastern side of the property. And from the neighboring property, Ms. Klein's, the sun deck is visible as you view to the west, which also there's an island behind the sun deck, which is also the view to the west. Professionally speaking, and being on the property and seeing the property, majority of the view from that property, or most scenic view from that property, is kind of to the northwest, out to the bay, out to the broad lake. We supplied the documents for a view shed, which clearly show very little or no impact of the proposed structure on the property to the neighboring property. From the home, there's no impact by evidence of the photos that the Park Commission took. From the yard, there's no impact as evidence from the photos that the Park Commission took. And the only potential for a little bit of different impact is looking directly west, which is again looking directly at an island, which also blocks the view to the main lake. Right now, there's currently a boat on a lift underneath the sun deck, and there's also typically a 30-foot sailboat that docks on the eastern side of that dock, which also extends out beyond the end of the existing dock. Between the boat on the lift and the sailboat on the eastern side of the dock, it more or less mimics what the wall will be of the proposed boathouse. So in our professional opinion, we always like to take view impact very seriously, and what the surrounding neighborhood will be and what effect will be with our projects. We don't feel that there is a view shed impact here based on what we provided, what you've seen yourselves in photos, and based on the fact that the dock will be in the same exact location as the existing dock. The wall itself is only extending 2 feet, 7 3/4 inches further into the lake than the post of the existing sun deck. So we're literally talking about a couple of foot difference of wall versus post of sun deck, where the boat currently is hanging in between the posts on the lift. But again, the existing sailboat does extend beyond the end of the dock currently, which is further than that 2 foot 7 3/4 inches. I think that's all I have at this point in time. I'd be happy to answer any questions specifically about the project, why we did what we did, the goals of the project, or any questions that you may have other than that.
Is this property new owners now?
I believe they've owned the property for roughly 8 to 10 years off that one.
I think somebody noticed that in that particular area, there's only one other dock which has the walls in it, and everything else is open.
Correct.
So this would be the second dock in that particular area, in that neighborhood with walls, correct?
It would be. The big difference here is that our property is at the mouth of Echo Bay. It's kind of in its own bay in itself, because the owners have 300 feet of frontage, but they also own an island out in front of the property. So if you look at that aerial mapping, the way the navigation channel comes in from the main lake into Echo Bay, and the way it turns into Echo Bay, our property is kind of set back and in between its own shoreline and the island. So we don't have any impacts with navigation. We don't have any impacts with any view shed from any of the properties within the bay whatsoever, because we're actually stood back If you look at all the aerial mapping, we're actually back in closer to shore than any other property or boathouse that's along that southern shoreline.
Would the owners be open to the idea of not closing the dock in?
No.
They would not.
They are making basically bringing back to life an old vintage Fay Bowen from Lake George originally. They've been working on it for a couple of years now, and the purpose of the closed-in boathouse is to protect the investment of the Fay Bowen with the finish on the boat and so on and so forth. Also planning for winter storage for that boat because the best location to store a boat of that nature is actually in a boathouse over the water. Still it stays in that climate year-round, not being taken out, put into a heated storage building, and taken somewhere else that's not above that water moisture content.
If I understand correctly, the island is owned by the same people?
It is.
Yeah.
Anybody else? Thank you. Mrs. Klein, I know you indicated to me in conversation the day we were up there last week that these are good neighbors for you. But in view of that, is there any constructive comments that you care to make? We realize you went through this predicament 20 years ago personally.
Dave just explained that view shed is important, and I find it interesting that no one who's ever had a glass of wine with me on my dock seems to know more about my view than I do. It will impact me to have closed walls because it doesn't let the light through, and it will turn the water between our two docks dark for most of the day. And I also find it interesting that I've always thought the Mohegan was a great boat, but I would never go out and buy a Mohegan-sized boat if I didn't have the dockage for it. So the argument about they've restored this boat, now they need to expand and impact my view for their personal property, that just doesn't seem to jive with me. The McMullins are wonderful neighbors. But everyone needs to be treated the same with the rules, the regulations, the comments, opinions. And I'm very concerned about the sunsets coming through. I mean, I can see through now and see the island and the water on the other side, and it's lovely. And that will be taken away from me. That's how I feel. Thank you.
Thank you. Kath, you and I were the only two that made the trip last week.
Yes, sir.
Do you have any comments, observations?
Sure, go, Jim.
I'm sorry. I heard today that it's going to be 4 feet higher. No one was in my home, and I noticed when I was sitting at my office, 4 feet really does cut off my view from my office and from my sun deck, through the trees and to the side. So 4 feet's an awful lot to add to a height. And it does impact as the sun comes down, the sunset, and the sunset light coming over to the property. Let me see, before I sit down. Yeah, and the general composition of our neighborhood. We don't have enclosed boathouses, especially in my view. I just don't see that.
Thank you. Kath?
Thanks, Ken. Mrs. Klein put it, I think, very nicely. I think you need to go there to really see the impact. I think Mrs. Klein basically said it all, and I would have a very tough time voting in favor of this project the way it has been presented. It is my recommendation that we do a modification in the resolution that we do not put any sides on this boathouse. You know, once something like this has been approved, Jennifer is right. It will be dark, the water will be dark, you can never get it back. So being there 2 times. We went last fall also. Or maybe it was in the winter. I can't, like I said, Ken, I can't vote for the project the way it's been presented.
Okay, thank you.
May I comment?
Sure.
It's been brought up twice now about the amount of light coming through the existing sun deck. If you do refer to the photos, you can clearly see that the boat that's within the sun deck and then the sailboat that's not there in the photos, but typically is docked on the eastern side, more or less blocks almost probably 75, maybe 80% of the visual light or view through the sun deck, almost again mimicking what a wall would be. So I just want to, again, reiterate that there's boats on lifts that do more or less do the same thing a wall would do.
It's a problem that we've faced for years, just when boat lifts started becoming more popular on the lake. We started realizing that once the boat comes up out of the water, it is a blockage, and you sometimes learn to live with it, and sometimes you don't have to.
May I comment to that?
Yes, you may.
Again, you've never sat on a dock, so I really can't put a lot of credence into your opinion of the sunlight and the natural light that comes through.
I'm talking about
A wall is involved. The sailboat is one of the old boats that was on the lake, and it's low. It does not come up above the dock. And the lift, it's a small gray white. So it's not like it's this humongous boat in there. There's plenty of light in the bow section and the stern. There's light coming through. I do have pictures, but I just don't appreciate the fact that you've never had a glass of wine with me and really enjoyed the light coming through.
Thank you. Counselor, if we pass this without sides, does that create a problem for the Park Commission as well? I mean, we can change it or recommend it.
You
How do we word it?
can recommend the change. It sounds like they're not going to go for it. So, I mean, you would be passing a resolution that would not do anything for them because I don't think the applicant would move forward. My understanding is the applicant would probably then turn around and try and bring some kind of action against the Park Commission on that. But, you know, maybe one of the things to do would be to discuss potential modifications. I don't know if there's any potential modifications you folks can come up with that would work with dock doctors, and I don't know if there's anything that your clients would be willing to do, or if they want to table this and move forward that way to allow for more discussion.
You said your clients, you made a blanket statement, no, two letters. So you're not authorized to accept any consideration on the application?
I don't know if there is any consideration. I mean, all ears to welcome suggestions on how it could be, modified or changed to be accepted or more accepted. But I don't think at this point in time we're going to make any concessions over at the table and come back with a different stance.
Staff, have any thoughts?
So, yeah, we've talked as staff about it. I think we all share the same concerns about general view shed issues. Yeah, we try to present you the projects that meet the standards. Sometimes we can't find that balance between people meeting the standards and then meeting what we might consider the character of that community. There doesn't seem to be a lot of contention about the extra distance out on that new boathouse and the extra height on the boathouse. So there's 3 things they're looking for primarily, and I can be corrected. But the siding, the height, and the extension. It appears that 2 out of 3 are not highly contentious. That third one is the level of contention. So if that's a general consideration by the board, then there could be an approval stating we approve this application. However, we are uncomfortable with the sides, or there could be some modification to that last stipulation, depending on what your concurrence is on that. But I think looking at, not hearing a lot of consternation about those 2 other changes, maybe that's some progress that can be made. And then ultimately, it's unfortunately your decision as to say, we do support the idea of a close-sided boathouse in this situation, or you do not.
I recall, I think it was behind Elizabeth Island, a boathouse that the applicant actually ended up having to remove most or all of these two sides that he had installed prior to getting approval.
I have a question for council.
Yes, sir.
They're saying the reason they have to have the siding on the thing is because they have an old wooden boat that they want to preserve. Would that come under financial hardship as a rationale for?
No.
No, it would not? Okay, just checking.
Because financial hardship is that there's no other opportunity for them to do it, and they could sort someplace else.
Okay.
So,
Okay.
Could I propose with windows, large windows, is that maybe that will allow sunlight and the screen? That's something that would be, sorry, I didn't bring that up in recommendation line.
I didn't hear the first part of your...
Large windows on the side of the boathouse would still allow light penetration, but still protect the boat.
Jason, the whole point of enclosing is to preserve, I had havercraft for years, and you really want to keep the sunlight, the UV off of it.
How did you deal with your hackercraft, Jennifer?
Pardon me?
How did you deal with your hackercraft?
Well, that was another problem with my application. We had, at that time, you didn't have to have a permit to have canvas awnings, like Dr. Evans has. And eventually, when we sold the hacker, we took them down. But I don't think you approve canvas awnings anymore.
Be the same as the boathouse.
It's basically a close up. Our canvases in the meeting were called a clown tent, I believe. I remember 20 years back by commissioner.
Cass, do you have any other comments?
No, I'm fine, thanks, Ken.
Bill?
I just have, I want to be clear on the length and the height and the square footage, that these are all allowed under the regulations. They are within, because they are going up and they're going out, and I always am concerned with that, but
It still needs the height, setback, and distance from shoreline. It would be otherwise approvable without comment.
okay. No, that was my only question.
Dave?
No, I want to rely on the people who went on the site visit to see if they could confirm there was, was blocking the view. And I think Kathy's indicated that, and
And I concur.
you concur with that, okay?
Dean?
Well, I have an old wooden boat too. It may not be as old as that Van Bowen, but I understand the problem. My boat's problem with Simon is we have rollable, I wouldn't say canvas, but rollable fabric, almost like a shade on a house window that you can put up and down. So in certain parts of this year when the sun's angle is low, you can just lower this down. It keeps the sun up.
It's still there, it's still blocking the light, it's still in my view shed.
Well, I understand.
I had that, I knew what it does.
Yeah, I understand that for sure. As far as storage goes, you put the boat on a trailer and you put it in somebody's garage. That's where mine goes. Okay.
Cass?
I did not attend the viewing. However, hearing from the commissioners that did, I would agree that changing the potential character of a neighborhood by adding walls might open up a problem for the future, and we don't want to change the character of the neighborhood.
Okay. Aaron?
Yeah, I was just looking to see if, it's probably not possible, but I'm sure you looked at all the alternatives. This boat is too long or maybe too deep. It couldn't be moved over and walled further to the north.
We didn't really get into redesign concepts or options with moving the structure further to the west towards the island. I don't think we'd have any other outcome, a different outcome, because it's still to the west. There's no way to wrap it around, so it's more important to go north or due west, because of the lack of water depth over in that location. So they're kind of in the same location as the existing, and I don't have other choices, unfortunately, as far as location.
What was the length of the boat? Does the boathouse wall have to be out to the extent that it is?
The boathouse wall is actually about 4 feet.
I've never been in favor of walled boathouses. I've never been in favor of walled boathouses.
I'm okay with them.
We have about maybe a foot.
I'm okay with them. I'm okay with this, but I think I'm in a minority here.
Okay. Looking for no more discussion. Michelle, can you do a roll call vote for us?
On what? You don't have a motion.
Oh, wow. You always stop me.
I know.
You want a
Whatever you
motion
come up with.
before we go? I thought it was an idea.
Ideas are great. You can't vote on ideas.
All right. Who's got a motion they can read? I might.
The applicant just raised his hand. You wanna talk to him?
If the applicant has a question.
I hear you. I see it. Go ahead.
Thanks, guys. Based on the discussion, we'll table this for today. We don't need to go any further.
You'd like to table it?
Okay.
Applicant has asked to table the application, and I would ask for a motion on that.
I'll move that.
I'll second it.
Seconded. A discussion? Hearing none. All in favor?
Aye.
It has passed. It is motion, it has been postponed. And you're going to work with staff on this, Mike?
Yes.
We're always available to both the applicant and any other people who speak for or against it for council. Okay, thank you.
Thank you all.
Good luck, everybody. Item next is a new Class A marina application submitted by Pleasant Waters LLC in the town of Bolton. Jason?
So this is for a new Class A marina off of 2 seasonal dock slips at 112 Cotton Point Road in Bolton on Cotton Point. The property is 347 feet of waterfront and is equipped with 4 docks, including 1 straight pier, 3 U-shaped docks. One of these is a closed-sided boathouse. The owner of the property has proposed establishing it as a Class A marina, offering 2 seasonal rental slips on the existing U-shaped dock, which is located on the northern part of Cotton Island on the shoreward part of it. I provided an ask for your review. The addition of these rental slips would result in a slight increase in traffic and boating density. However, it falls within acceptable guidelines set by LGPC and conditions for this area of the lake. I addressed that in my secret review, which was on pages 14 to 23, and there is a staff memo detailing those. Adequate parking areas, trash receptacles, and portable toilets were designated on the site plan by the applicant. We did receive one comment expressing general concerns about a marina in a residential area, listing potential increased traffic, parking issues, problems with toilet facilities, or potential for general lake pollution. On Tuesday, May 23rd, staff, along with Jim Carter and Commissioner Lombard, visited the site. I included site photos and reminders of locations of these amenities and the working locations. The binder also contains a line analysis that's detailing on impacts to the neighborhood. Justin Anderson, which is a caretaker and Brad is representing the LLC here to speak on this. If there's any questions specifically about the regulations or the application on technical stance, let me know. Otherwise, I'll lean on Justin for specific stuff about it.
Good morning. I'm here representing Pleasant Waters LLC, and we're looking to have 2 boat slips that are already existing on our island and just use them as a seasonal rental. We put facilities out there. We decided to go with a porta potty to start because we don't want to do anything on our septic system until it actually been inspected. Now this is coming up. We want to make sure that our facilities, by adding a toilet or more inflow, can handle the additional volume without any issues. I'm happy to answer any questions you guys may have about our plans, the site.
Questions? Thank you. Anyone else here to speak to that project? For, against, around, about? Kath, you were on a visit to it. Do you have any thoughts?
It was clear-cut, nice location. We had a concern about the porta potty, and I think we resolved that by moving it and putting a little structure around
Putting
it.
a structure around, and you
Yeah.
guys asked a question about how often it would be pumped. Upon approval, I've contracted with IBS to drop it off, and it is weekly pumping, that's part of the contract.
Oh, excellent.
So it will be weekly, be removed post October 31st. That's when our renters have to be outside.
Pretty straightforward, I think, Ken.
Okay. Any other comments, questions from the commission?
No.
Hearing none, I have a resolution that I'll read before we ask for a vote.
Kathy, you want me to read it?
You want to read it? Yeah.
No, I have it right here, I just...
Sure, be my guest, please.
All right, Resolution 2023-15 for May 30th, 2023, for application number M23-000011 at 112 Cotton Point Road, Bolton Landing, Pleasant Waters, LLC. Whereas the applicant proposed a new Class A marina offering 2 seasonal rental slips on an existing U-shaped dock, and whereas the Lake George Park Commission has reviewed the application, supporting documents, comments received, and other information which appears in the record, and whereas the commission has made a determination that the project is an unlisted action pursuant to the State Environmental Quality Review Act, 6 NYCRR 617.5, and as lead agency for the purposes of the State Environmental Quality Review Act, has made a determination that the project will have no significant impact on the environment, and whereas the action is considered to be a major project pursuant to 6 NYCRR 645-5.3, and public notice has been published and distributed as required, and whereas the applicant has demonstrated that the activity and facility comply with the Class A marina requirements of 6 NYCRR 646-1.2b, and whereas the commission finds that the project will have no adverse impact on the health, safety, or welfare of the public, the environment, or the resources of the park, will not alter the essential character of the area in which it is proposed, will not lead to congestion in the park, and will not have an undue visual, cultural, or audible impact on the neighborhood or the park. Now therefore be it resolved, the Lake George Park Commission hereby resolves to approve the above application. Should I put anything in there for modifications with the porta potties, or we're all set?
I think it's pretty well set.
Okay.
I just wanted to ask real quick, Mr. Parker, you guys had mentioned that. I did say I'm more than open to move it to a different location, but that wasn't clear if you guys wanted me to move it or just put some sort of a barrier so the neighbors had privacy against the porta potty.
My recollection, the final analysis was a barrier.
Yeah.
Just a barrier. I just wanted to make sure.
So that would be
Yeah.
blocked from that one house to your north.
Yes, so thank you.
So we'll leave the porta potties like they were shown on the map and put a barrier around them. So,
That's a
vote?
pretty nice looking piece of property, so we know you're not going to screw it up too badly. Motion's been made,
Second.
seconded. Any further discussion on that motion? All in favor? signify.
Yes.
Aye.
Any nays? Hearing none, that motion is passed. Thank you very much. Next item on our agenda, dock modification submitted by Scrimshaw Ventures in the Village of Lake George.
So I'm going to take this one for Joe. This is a variance request for a dock modification to an HOA dock at piles and boat lifts beyond 40 feet from the mean low water mark and 100 feet from the mean high water mark, requiring variance to be voted on by the board. Scrimshaw Estates has HOA on the northwest side of Lake George Village. It is just south of English Delta, which deposits a good amount of sand and sediment, which has made berthing there challenging due to the shallow nature. So they have previously requested a variance and achieved it last year to modify their current shape, which is several dock complexes together and extends about 193 feet out. Last year, it was modified to one straight pier with 5 fingers extending. So this variance request is building on the current configuration that's been proposed and voted on last year in approval is just to be adding pilings in between the boats for protection of wind and wake and as a tourist concern. So on page 22 is the site plan for your review, seeing the 3 additional boat lifts and the location of the piles to be placed, again, being greater than 100 feet from shore as a flag variance. So, you know, you can let me know if you have questions on the technical side about this. I don't know if anyone representing Scrimshaw, but so I'm happy to turn that over to whoever would like to speak.
Welcome to the mic. Would you identify yourself for the record, please? And
my name is Chris McLear. I'm the president of DHOA. So we've been through a few years of getting all the agencies on board with our plans. It's a tricky situation over there at the Delta. So we are going to commence our project in October. Over a period of years, things changed. We had an idea to put dividers in between our boats on deck, but wide, we understand that's not really the dream of the Park Commission. So in lieu of that, we downsized some of our square feet that were approved, and we just want to put piles in between, 2 8x8 piles in between each of our stalls to divide them. Our dock going out, the summer wind is brutal. It's always coming on shore with us, and so the boats that face that side they're pretty rough. So to have that ability to tie off to those other poles would help greatly with our boats.
as simple as that.
Simple, hopefully.
Anybody else here to speak to that issue? Any of the commissioners have any questions for the applicant? Last time you folks were here, I think you were talking about how the swimmers would walk over and sit on your decks, not knowing they were private or not caring that they were private.
It's in my memo that we love tourists, not that much, but we do love them. We have to accommodate what we have down there.
How many homes in there?
There's 12 sites that was the original approval for in the mid-80s.
Everybody has a home, so there's theoretically 12 homes out there.
Yes.
Anybody else have any comments, questions? Looking. Anybody have? Thank you. You have the resolution in front of you? Commissioner LeBombard, you're right on the ball today.
Well, I did okay the last time. Okay.
You know, the Army Corps of Engineers was the last kind of a hurdle prior to all this, and I outlived them also. One guy retired, he put his resignation, the other guy retired for the state, and the new guy took over, he just wanted his desk cleared, so that's us. Rob reminders, what we've been through, all the pain in the last 3 years, been straightforward.
Thankless.
Resolution.
Okay, Resolution 2023-16, application number DWM 23-000050, dock modification, Scrimshaw Estates, whereas the applicant has applied for a permit to add wood piles and boat lifts to a dock complex, and whereas the Lake George Park Commission has reviewed the application, supporting documents, comments received, and other information which appears in the record, and whereas the Commission has made a determination pursuant to 6 NYCRR 645-3.6 and the State Environmental Quality Review Act 6 NYCRR 617.5, that the project is a Type 2 action and does not require further review of potential environmental impacts pursuant to this act, and whereas the action is considered to be a minor project pursuant to 6 NYCRR 645-5.3, and public notice has been published and distributed consistent with the regulations, and whereas the applicant has requested a variance from 646-1.1C2I, no dock or wharf may extend offshore for more than 40 feet beyond the mean low water mark, and 646-1C23, No dock should be constructed to extend more than 100 feet from the mean high water mark, whereas the applicant has demonstrated that strict conformance with the regulations will cause unnecessary hardship due to unique and peculiar circumstances which impose substantial financial, technical, or safety burdens, and whereas the commission finds that there is no reasonable possibility that the applicant's property, or if no property is involved, the continuation of the applicant's business, enterprise, use, or activity will bring a reasonable return following conformance with the regulations, and whereas the commission finds that the project will have no adverse impact on the health, safety, or welfare of the public, the environment, the resources of the park, will not alter the essential character of the area in which it is proposed, will not lead to congestion in the park, and will not have an undue visual, cultural, or audible impact in the neighborhood or the park. So now therefore be it resolved, the Lake George Park Commission hereby approves the request for variance and approves the above application as proposed. So.
That's a motion.
Second?
Motion made, motion seconded. Excuse me. Any discussion on that motion? Hearing none. All in favor?
Aye.
Any nays? Hearing none of those. This is passed. Good luck.
Thank you.
Have a better boating season this year, maybe, if summer ever gets here.
Thank you so much.
The rumor is it may be here now. Item next is a new tour boat application submitted by Drew Zenart in the town of Bolton. Jason?
So this is my project, and Drew Zener is not here today, I believe. Keep that in mind as we're reviewing this. Drew Zener, owner of Zener Guide Services LLC, has proposed a new tour boat operation on Lake George, offering guided fishing trips in southern portions of the lake, areas south of the Motherwell Islands. The tour boat will berth and operate from the Flamingo Resort for passenger pickup only. This is a Class A marina, and it will offer a maximum of 2 trips per day. The vessel is a 21-foot Nitro ZV-21. It will be berthed in the most northern slip of the enclosed boathouse of the Flamingo property. The fishing guide will operate between the hours of 7 a.m. and 5 p.m. It will carry a maximum of 5 people. That includes the captain, so 4 passengers total. This operation is replacing in kind another fishing guide service, which was Hunter Charters, which went to O'Sullivan's in Lake George Village last year. Same portion of the lake to be visited, same number of trips and people permitted. So there was no expectation of change in traffic or voter congestion in the secret analysis. As of May 13th, there was no public comments, save one from the northern neighbor requesting that the boat not be berthed along his property line, which it wasn't proposed to anyway, so not a basis to comment really. So the one condition here is that Mr. Zener has not found overnight storage for his vessel yet or a quick launch facility. So approval of this tour boat operation will be conditional on him eventually finding a Class A marina to berth at overnight or a quick launch facility, because right now he is just going to be doing his pickup at Flamingo. There was some miscommunication about what the requirements were. He thought that he did launch every day, say from the village. We had to explain quick launch and the definition of that. So he's looking for a quick launch facility or a Class A marina in his restaurant. So that would be a condition on this, but we wanted to get him on the agenda, seeing that the fishing season is short. I'll do my best to answer any questions about this application and our tour boat regulations in general.
What did I miss when you started your conversation? The boat was being kept in the northernmost?
It will be picked up, the passenger pickup will be, yes.
That's where he'll come in, pick up, and leave?
Pick up people on the north side of the boathouse and leave. Right now, no place to store the boat overnights.
Well, what can we offer him here that, I mean, she doesn't have a place to qualify for our regulation. I mean, is he looking for approval subject to, and how do we follow the subject to that it really happens? And come Labor Day, well, I just couldn't find any place. It's a tough wall to climb.
Yeah, I would think that you would attach a condition, I don't think the staff would even just withhold it, the application or the permit until.
I see.
So your resolution would have a condition that had entirely correctly.
No, you're right.
So there would be a condition attached to the resolution, and then staff at our administrative level would not issue the permit until he has, shown us proof of his Class A marina burning slip in support of this. So at that point,
A conditioned approval so that it's done at this level. And then once they prove to them that he has it, then they give him the permit.
So on that condition of the conditions, it would be appropriate to do.
Correct. Couple conditions.
Question?
Two questions, or two questions. First of all, haven't we approved, or did we approve a tour boat one time that was parked in a residential lot, and then the pickups and wasn't it the tiki boat one time, or one of those was parked in the residential?
yes. So that was his own residence. And that was a chain. Later on, he did end up getting a working slip. So it was proposed his own residence. And then, but later on, he did get the slip from.
Okay. I just was trying to be consistent. If we sometimes do that, it would seem to me that you could park a boat at a residence as long as you drove away and you're doing all your business at this location. That would make sense to me, so I just want to be consistent.
Registered as a marina.
The other question I have, looking at the plan for the area, that northern deck, it looks like there's a dock going all the way around it, and it's not a boathouse? There's a big boathouse on the south end of the property, and then there's another thing that's got the bridge structure attached that goes north. Is that just I didn't go on a site visit. A great big giant pier that size with a deck on top of it? Wow.
Yeah. So he's in spot 4, you're looking on the plan, the closest furthest dock 4, which we are review.
Okay, thank you. Just curious. I want to go on a site visit sometime and look. I'll do it by boat. Take a look.
Density-wise, he's replacing theoretically the hooker charter, so that in theory, we already have that density on the lake, and he's not adding to it.
So that would be considered last year when he went to O'Sullivan's, which was a new tour boat operation. He's just filling in kind the services.
Any other comments, questions?
I just have a question. Jason, so Mr. Zener he can keep the boat there all day. There's no issue with keeping it in that berth all day. He just can't keep it there overnight.
That was the understanding of his plan. He worked out passenger pickup with the Flamingo. I don't know specifically if he's going to be hanging out there all day. I think that.
Oh.
Yeah. So.
Because I was wondering, like, where is he going to go when he's not picking up the passengers? Back to the overnight place.
Yeah, he proposed to quick launch at $1 Million Beach, right? And you guys will all recall the Adirondack boat tours that we had a couple-year lawsuit with about him not operating in a Class A marina. So this was a big deal for the Park Commission, and we need to maintain that standard. And when staff let Mr. Zener know several times that he needed to find a Class A marina on the lake, it gets a little bit complicated for some people that don't live in the world. So we got a slip at Venom's Bay Marina, but it wasn't one of the quick launch slips, so he paid a lot less for that. So he's like, I'll just launch it out of this. And we informed him yet again, that doesn't meet the standard. You need to be at a Class A marina as one of the quick launch boats or on the water. So he's working on that. It's just been an iterative process with him. He's fairly new to this, and he wasn't taking some staff suggestions for the past several months and looking seriously into that. So now we believe he's due. He could get a conditional approval, as Jason has stated, with the idea that we're going to ensure that he's operating within the commission regulations.
You folks want me to ask for a conditional approval resolution to be read?
Yeah.
Chairman, I have one question.
Yep, sure.
Do we have any responsibility, because I'm recalling back another time we looked at this, in assuring that there's a real license operating this?
Staff usually...
He did submit his PV license. Sorry, I didn't attach that. It should have been his application. modification, and he is I can ask him for it, could be another condition, I'm not sure, he said he's a DC guy license. So he has, but I
Is that something that we have responsibility to check or do, or?
We can kind of do it as a courtesy to the other agencies, just to make sure that they have everything in hand. Generally, before anything comes to you guys, everything from other agencies will already be lined up, so I'm assuming that's part of everything taken care of. Yeah.
Good question to ask, though.
Sure.
Are you qualified to take my kids out? Okay. Where's my resolution reader?
If I'm doing okay, I'll keep it up.
Not getting fired yet.
Okay.
What about another one?
All right, here we go. Resolution 2023-17, number TB 23000003 at 3914 Lake Shore Drive, Flamingo Resort, applicant Drew Zienert. Okay, whereas the applicant has applied for a permit to operate a tour boat from the Flamingo Resort on Lake George, offering fishing charter services from one vessel, and whereas the Lake George Park Commission has reviewed the application, supporting documents, comments received, and other information which appears in the record, and whereas the Commission has made a determination that the project is an unlisted action pursuant to the State Environmental Quality Review Act 6 NYCRR 617.5, and as lead agency for the purposes of the State Environmental Quality Review Act, has made a determination that the project will have no significant impact on the environment, and whereas the action is considered to be a major project pursuant to 6 NYCRR 645-5.3, and public notice has been published and distributed as required, and whereas the applicants have demonstrated compliance with standards for tour boats at 6 NYCRR 646-1.4D, and the facility complies with Class A marina requirements of 6 NYCRR 646-1.2B, and whereas the Commission finds that the project will have no adverse impact on the health, safety, or welfare of the public, the environment, or the resources of the park, and will not alter the essential character of the area in which it is proposed, will not lead to congestion in the park, and will not have an undue visual, cultural, or audible impact on the neighborhood or the park. Now therefore be it resolved, the Lake George Park Commission hereby approves the above applications with the following modifications or conditions: that the approval of the subject application is conditioned on the applicant finding a suitable berthing or authorized quick launch facility on the lake. Such location shall be reviewed for compliance by staff prior to formal issuance of a tour boat permit.
Second.
Okay?
Motion made, motion second. Staff agree with that wording that we have? Okay, thank you. All in favor of the resolution as read?
Aye.
Any nays? Hearing none. Application is passed with the condition previously mentioned. Thank you very much. Moving along here on a crowded day. Project build funding proposal submitted by the Warren County SWCD. Mr. Wick.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Very happy to have Jim Lieberman here today, the District Manager of Warren County Soil and Water Conservation. And so to back up a little bit, as I've sent you guys a few emails over the last year plus, we've been working with primarily the division budget staff on everything to do with the commission. And what we're charged with doing was to be authorizing legislation or what the commission could be if it weren't always so bound by the limited resources that we have to do more, right? So we don't get general fund money. None of your tax dollars goes to pay a dime to the Lake George Park Commission. The only money that we have traditionally gotten is from 95% is about boat and dock registration fees, and then Roger administers the lake level, that's about another 3%. But that basically keeps the lights on and pays the staff, right? So what the Environmental Protection Fund has done for us is that we historically paid for the milfoil program. And then when we started the boat inspection program, we got a $350,000 increase. So then we had a $450,000 EPF allocation. So that would solely pay for those two very important programs, milfoil control and our boat inspection program. So we've started when I got here at 100,000 per year, and we actually split that 100,000 per year between the boat steward program, 40,000 for the LJ and 60,000 for milfoil. So over time, we've been pretty happy and successful working with Division of Budget and kind of increasing those resources as we move forward. So over the last couple of years, we've moved our portfolio, moved out of Department of State into DEC. And while that seems like an administrator who cares, for us it was a pretty big deal because DEC is much more in tune with what the Park Commission does, and the team that administers the Environmental Protection Fund out of that Division of Budget staff decided to take a keen interest in the Lake George Park Commission really for the first time in my 11 years here, and probably in Roger's 32. So we're thinking that was a pretty good deal, and so as we always like to highlight Lake George, as it were, and the special resource that we have up here, we invited these people to come on up and learn about what we're doing and how we can do better if we got additional resources towards the lake. The new gentleman, who's not new, but in charge of our portfolio is Joe Ogden, and he's come up a couple different times with his staff, taken them out on the lake on lunch and discussed the broader needs for Lake George and the Commission's operating charter and authority from when it was originally started in the beginning. If you take a look at Article 43, there's one paragraph about this long that reads all of these things that the Commission, number one, is charged with doing statutorily, but also can do. There's very little that the Commission can't do for the resources of the Lake George Park. So we've been kind of building a narrative with both the governor's office staff and the budget staff now for a couple of years. And if you recall, last year we were successful at getting an increase. We thought we were hoping for about 200, and they gave us 450 extra. So we had a $900,000 EPF budget allocation last year for the first time ever. So 9 times the amount that we had when I started here. So that was a big increase. And we didn't even ask for that, but Joe said, you guys have important needs up here. Right now, it's solely confined to the invasive species line, but we know you're looking to do some work with milfoil on Marcellacor. We know you're running a strong boat inspection program, and staffing needs have increased and reduced costs. So this is what we want to give you, and let's see how that works out, right? So we spent quite a bit of that money last year on the milfoil program, the boat inspection program. The Marcellacor project got pushed off, but that money rolled into this year. But as we continued those conversations, they said, we want to try to work to expand your authority in the EPF and be outside of that one individual line item. And we said, that would be fantastic. Let us know what we can do to help. And they really carried the ball on that. So as we were closing out this budget year, although it was a little bit late, it was very beneficial for the Park Commission because we maintained that same level, that $900,000. And in our conversations with the Director of Budget, at least for the Environmental Division, we said, so let's be abundantly clear before we start to allocate some of these resources, what can they be allocated to? And so they can be allocated to the benefit of the Lake George Park. So outside of not paying for New York State staffing, which is the #1 no-go in the EPF, this commission, with your authority and approval, can do better things for the Lake George Park, whatever that might be within our level of stature, which is fairly broad. So I know this is a long walk to get to where we are now, but this is kind of important, I think, for the commission. And what this does is it allows us to think a little bit more broadly and what we can do, whether it might be research with Darren Freshwater, whether it might be projects working with Warren County, Washington County, and Essex County Soil and Water Conservation Districts, or the Lake George Association, or any of our partners, or also contract out for our specific work to do additional things that the commission may want to do directly. So the first foray into that, since I have a long working relationship with Warren County Soil and Water, is the commission has always been very good at pre-planning and lining up projects that are simply at some point in need of some funding to get some work done. They've always been very good at it. They continue under Jim's leadership to be very good at that. So we had a feeling that we were going to be successful in the EPF this year. We didn't know exactly what level, but we were carrying into the 900. So I've been having these conversations with Jim and with his counterparts in Essex County and Washington County to say, do you have projects that are lined up and kind of ready to go? And if so, can we detail some of those projects out and see if our Board of Commissioners thinks this is a good use of some of these resources? So that's what we have in front of you. So right now, we have $76,000 worth of projects, 5 projects kind of outlined in this that can be accomplished by the fiscal year closeout, which essentially is, well, for us, I'm talking to Jim, we're going to try to get everything done by the end of this calendar year, but essentially we have to the end of the fiscal year on April 1st to get this work done. We're also working with Kevin Rose over at Durham Fresh Water on some scientific work. That's not ready for prime time yet, so I'll bring you more up to speed on that as we advance it. But at least from my take on it, and working with Joe and talking with Jim and Nick over at Soil and Water, we think here are some projects that can really get us a first good year out of the gate. Let's get some of these projects on the ground and let's start planning future projects. My experience with the EPF, it's been in place since 1996, is once you have a line item in the EPF, the first year is the big win. Getting it to maintain that second year is where you're fairly solid into the future, unless there's a reduction in the EPF. And in all of these years, there's never been a reduction in the EPF once it's established at a certain level. This year, 400 million. So we think what we have in front of you, hopefully you've had a chance to review it. I'd like to maybe give Jim a couple of minutes to talk about what they're looking at. But taking a look at this as kind of an entry into this topic would be great. We have some time if you want to discuss any of these, and it's up to the chairman's discretion, but we can take any time at any point over the next year and sit at a full commission level or at a committee level and start to discuss some of these broader opportunities. But this is kind of an entry into that. So that's a lot of backstory, so I apologize for that, but I think it kind of sets the stage for what you have in front of you today. And Mr. Chairman, if you want Jim to talk about anything that you have in front of you, he'd be happy to answer any questions.
That's what we got him for.
For you?
He's the man with the advice. Now, didn't you follow David in that job?
I did. So we improved on it.
So you have a high standard to...
Yes, yes. And we enjoy working with the Park Commission. And, you know, probably the largest thing that I learned when at Soil and Water when Dave was there is basically, you know, the partnerships that are developed are actually what make everything go. And so, you know, when we're looking at projects and when Dave asked about this, you know, we try not to take a look and say, oh, what can we necessarily get out of it? But, you know, I look at it, I don't live in the watershed, I live in the town of Nerman. And, you know, how do we operate outside of the Lake George watershed part of Champlain Basin, which has a lot more funding opportunities out there, and it's a partnership, so it doesn't really matter. You know, where the money's coming from, it's who you're working with. So whether it's highway departments, NGOs, other agencies, you know, we're looking at the broader scope. And, you know, Ron Montesi was on my board for a number of years, and I asked Ron, you know, how do you get things done? He's like, well, you know, I might not like you, I like you, but if there's a problem, let's fix it. It's kind of how we go about it. So, you know, what you're looking at on the projects here, there's 5 of them that we've put together. And what is it doing? They're looking at not only giving information to Dave and the communities as far as, you know, the first one is outfall sampling, and we do that for town of Queensbury and Moore County in the municipal separate storm sewer system, which is a regulated permit from the DEC and the EPA. But those are only in defined urban areas. So Village of Lake George, part of the town of Lake George, part of the town of Queensbury in the Lake George watershed. It's a very odd how it's broken up. If you know the Warren County Municipal Center, the Department of Social Services building and the County Municipal Center are in the MS4 boundary, but the ring road is the boundary, so the Sheriff's Department is not part of it. You know, so it's very odd. So, but we go, we do outfall sampling, reconnaissance, dry weather discharges. You're looking at culverts or discharges. You know, even this time of year right now, you go out, maybe dry, August, if it's dry, take all the physical attributes, put it in the data points and upload it. It's uploaded to the cloud, and Dave would have access to that. Then it goes beyond that. If there's water running, then we can take a sample. And it's a discrete sample. It's just going to give you the first glance of what you're looking at. And it's going to say X, Y, Z, and here's the results. And Nick Rowell and I did, you know, we do it for the city of Glens Falls too, in the canal, feeder canal. And one day we did a quick analysis, and the chlorine sample turned pink very quickly. Well, it it turns out the city had a water line break and was getting into the stormwater system. So, there is a lot of follow-up that can be done. And why is it done? It's for the protection of our waters, because again, we're all connected in Warren County with, our economy is driven by our natural resources. That's what it is. We're not probably going to be building a gold factory up in Johnsburg. So we have to bring people here and second houses and the tourist industry. And I want my son to live here after, he's started on a career. So looking forward, that's what we really look for. So that's why we have some of the sampling there. Purchasing a unit, which is $10,000 in itself, and has different types of probes, so you can do different types of analyses. And then if there's an issue, they can take a look at the data and say, yep, we need to follow up on this because this isn't, you take the data and say, oh, there's definitely problems. Like there's something here we have to identify, and then it goes to a water sample and gets fully analyzed if necessary. But this would be for the areas, again, outside of the mapped MS4 boundaries of Queensbury, Town Lake George. So this would be in Bolton, Hague, and then the remainder of the area in Queensbury and Lake George. That's not municipal storm sewer system. Number two is the county has approached us. They're looking at reducing stormwater runoff on Oregon Ave, right over here. And for a fairly simple project, taking the water that's coming off from the road up above, the various land uses, some of it's forest land that's coming down, some of it's generated by the road, some of it's pre-existing buildings and other structures. The water's coming down, and it has the opportunity, if it doesn't go into one of the storm systems, due to the amount of material that gets down into there and how much it is blocking it, it can get down. It's tough to say, but either down on Brook Ave or continue down by the school. So it's getting into either Finkelbrook or a tributary that goes underneath Route 9 and exits around Stewart's. So they want to take the stormwater, put it through some type of green infrastructure, and ultimately into the ground. They have the opportunity to do that up in the Highland area where we've done work with them before. So that just kind of fell in there. That would be easy or relatively easy fix. We have worked with several communities successfully. We are starting to do a lot more green infrastructure, and even though porous concrete sidewalk is gray, it's considered green infrastructure. We replaced 440 feet of concrete sidewalks with porous concrete sidewalks in the city of Glens Falls about 6 years ago. It held up extremely well. Water is allowed to perk down through. Any amount of sunlight will start to warm the concrete even in wintertime and allow a melting. So it's just almost a near reduction to zero of salt that landowners have to put down. It's a lot easier to maintain. You get rid of, and I'm not being funny, I don't know what you would call it, but you get rid of the moguling effect, where everything heaves up, because you have a giant vapor barrier, so water can be evaporated off. So that's worked out very well. Lake George, Keith Lanthier has put in some of these sections, and it's worked well. The challenge is maintenance, but the LGA provided the Town of Lake George Parks and Recreation a unit called the Bird, which allows for basically a regenerative vacuuming of these types of systems. And there's MOAs out there that allows other communities to borrow it. So the infrastructure to maintain it is already in place. So we're proposing working with Hague the Village of Lake George or the Town of Lake George on continuing that, because we see that's where there's a lot of benefit in stormwater reduction. You get rid of the stormwater, you don't have to worry about contributions to the lake after. One thing we did put in there, we've started doing is having a store of some erosion sediment control materials in our at our office or at our barn. This has come to light where I carry the title of the hazard mitigation coordinator for the county, so we do a lot of response after storm event. The 2019 Halloween storm was fairly significant. Hague got hit hard, but then the western part of the county was impacted as well. And we had a limited supply of these types of materials. Rolled erosion control blankets, the availability to procure stone very quickly, even if it's a temporary fix to manage actively or highly eroding areas from entering a stream or the lake is important. Then a permanent fix can be detailed out if necessary. But a lot of our highway departments, Warren County's fortunate, we're not large government-wise. We have, 10, I think, units of government essentially, towns, village, city, and the county. So when you're looking at Lake George, we have Village of Lake George, Town of Lake George, Queensbury, Bolton, and Hague in our county. If we can have some of these supplies on hand when an event hits, or if they just need it in their daily process, if we can get them to do more, we just say buttoning up of items and get them to do the things that should be done to reduce the amount of impacts, then that would be outstanding. And really, they bought into it fairly well. There's always a learning curve when there are new staff involved, so you have to kind of keep going with it. It's not something that we're going to stop doing. It's just this provides additional support in the watershed. And lastly, Orbed Reservoir. We help maintain that with the Village of Lake George and the LGA. It's an old water supply reservoir that's currently, there's a bypass and it goes down for gray water. I don't want to say gray water, but untreated drinking water. It goes to the Village of Lake George transfer station, is used for hand washing and toilets and things like that. And the rest of it goes, it's part of the Westbrook system. Very nice water. The reservoir fills up. We have it maintained, which means we go in there and dredge it out. A partial dredge within every 5 years, I would say. We take about 250 yards of material out. The current bypass for that is failing. It was never a grate. It was a ditch dug in the hillside, and there's plastic and I think erosion control fabric on top of it. So last time we did it, I think it was 3 years ago, it was weeping out considerably, causing a big mess. We actually had to deploy a lot of erosion sediment control supplies and materials right where we were working. So we proposed, talked to Keith at the village about putting a closed system in to reroute the water to the same location. But then that way it keeps a tighter seal so water can bypass easily. And secondly, instead of having some fish basically caught in that where we have to go up and grab them, transport them down, if we happen to see them, get them right down back into the stream, and they'll just flush through. A longer run, but not dissimilar to if you've ever seen them stocking Geyser Creek down at Spot Park, some things like that. So those are the 5 projects that we came up with. I'm glad to try to answer any questions that you have.
Thank you. Any conversations?
Nice job.
So we'd like to have Jim do, if the board is supportive of this, and if Roger and I can find a way to get Jim paid, because state procurement is sometimes more complicated. They don't always see the gray areas of working with partners as opposed to going out for 3 bids for a private company. Anyway, if we do get this moving and we can get Jim a contract, then we'd like to do this on a regular basis with outside providers, partners, that if we come up with ideas, present them to the board, they do the work, they can be involved at any given time. At the end of the year, we'd like to have them come back, do a brief presentation on the work that was accomplished, and look towards ideas for the future. So that's kind of a grand idea, and we hope for a first cut, this will need some support, and we'll keep moving forward.
Do you need a resolution of support today?
We don't need a resolution per se, a motion and second to accept this proposal and to allow me to advance contract with Roger to get it done would be fantastic.
I'd make that motion.
You made that motion?
Absolutely.
Seconded. Any further discussion from the commission? All in favor?
Aye.
Any nays? Hearing none, that document is now part of today's minutes and part of our future. It's a good way to get out into the community. I believe that is the last agenda item we got.
Don't forget
me.
Oh, I'm sorry. You sit here and you sit there.
We got you covered.
Listen, you know me, it just kind of floats. I'm a haven't died guy.
The Law Enforcement Committee met this morning.
Call on you first?
No, that's all right. We had a long meeting. Right now, we have 6 boats in the water, and they're all running well. Glenn Mitchell has been selected as our new sergeant. Glenn has been with the Lake George Park Commission for 16 years. Patrols have been on the water every day since the beginning of May, 1 boat on the water weekdays until May 12th, then 2 boats a day. On weekends, there will be 3 boats on each day. We are going to be conducting our boater education classes at no cost again this year. There had one last weekend. There's another one scheduled for June 17th, and we're going to be scheduling one in July and one in August. There's no cost for these classes, and they're going to be necessary for people to get their boating licenses, which they're going to all have to have in the next 2 years. Memorial weekend was very, very nice, great weather, a lot of boat traffic. However, we're sad to report that we had a drowning. A 27-year-old male jumped in the water to the jumping rock at West Dollar Island and didn't make it to the shore. And they recovered him 32 feet deep in the water. We also had another incident where a man was swimming and has had a major heart attack and is in Glens Falls Hospital in critical care. So we are hoping that he makes it through, but there's no guarantee that he will. We discussed today at the Law Enforcement Committee meeting our septic program. And to date, we've had 26 inspections. And of the 26, 6 of the inspections were incomplete in that the people being inspected did not have all of the things uncovered that had to be uncovered, whether it be the D boxes or all of the septic tank. So those are incomplete and have to be redone. We had 8 failures, and we had 9 passed, and we had 3 substandard. So this is it's kind of interesting, that since we put this program in effect, we're running at a failure rate and at a substandard rate at fairly high percentages compared to all the inspections being done. But that's why we put this program in place, and we're starting to see some great results. And I guess a lot of the failures, what I'm hearing from staff, has been drain fields and the D-box situation and the material going into the drain field. So there may be some very pricey repairs coming as a result of these inspections. I have a resolution to read, if I can get it here on my computer. I need to do that. I have it. Resolution 2023-18. Whereas the Law Enforcement Committee met on May 30th, 2023 to review matters pertaining to the Lake George Park Commission's Marine Patrol and the Commission's Lake Enforcement Program, and whereas active law enforcement cases and their statuses were not reviewed in executive session, and whereas the Law Enforcement Committee has reported on the results of that committee meeting at the full commission meeting, and the Law Enforcement Committee recommends acceptance of this month's law enforcement report. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the commission accepts the report of the Law Enforcement Committee. I so move.
Second.
Motion's made, motion second. Any discussions, any corrections? Hearing none. All in favor?
Aye.
Against? Hearing none. It is carried. Item 6, and the next to last item, is public comments. We've warned everybody out. Yes.
Just in case anybody didn't know, they've got a hold of our office and actually the new mayor as well. And next week is the New York State Aquatic Invasive Species Week, and it might be good if the Park Commission sent something out in regards to that. Over the course of the last 2 weeks, a few days, and some of our additional time, Dave and Joe, I think Joe was down there, Randy from the LGA, I know Chris has been down there, here, been down there. 2 of my staff are down at the Westbrook Conservation Initiative because somebody decided to put the whole aquarium worth of goldfish in the pond 7. So goldfish are a carp, which are a minnow, and they can cause problems depending on where they are. So, you know, environmentally, they can surely have an impact, but I look at it as a manager at a time, and people complain about, you know, what do we do? Well, 30 hours of my staff time is down there taking care of a problem that should never have started because people don't understand. They can't just take your goldfish and dump them wherever. And we had that issue. I've dealt with goldfish in the watershed numerous times. The biggest impact I ever saw, or biggest evidence I ever saw was when I was in college. There was flooding out in Ithaca, and it was all flooded. The Kmart parking lot was flooded 2 feet deep, and there were people out there with long-handled nets catching goldfish this big. So, I mean, goldfish will get big. But I guess it would just be a good time, instead of not just only, you know, projects and programs, but getting just that reminder to people that, hey, this is where Asian plants came from, how much did we spend on gold, you know, because really, when you talk economics, it's home a little bit more. And we try to approach it all, but I just wanted to throw it out there because, yeah, it's another thing that you folks have to be cognizant of, that we help to deal with, and it's something that everybody should deal with. So, that's all.
Kind of like an attaboy for the executive director?
I don't even know who found that, Jim. We're over there.
Ray and then possibly other people, but I think that might have seen it before. But it's that, oh, well, they're fish. You know, you put fish in water. Well, yes, but
Better than gators.
Yep, and then, so if you Google Lake Tahoe goldfish, if you're ever bored, you'll find one of Lake Tahoe's largest water quality problems is massive schools of goldfish that go around defecating everywhere and increasing the nitrogen and phosphorus content because some kids dumped their goldfish into the lake and they didn't get eaten up by the predators out there. So the concern among the conservation folks is that that pond actually has a direct discharge into Westbrook, which goes right out into Lake George. And while Westbrook Delta has plenty of predator fish out there, should something like that happen, there is no control for it. And that will be it. And we'll have our newest invasive species in Lake George. So Jim, thanks to his work with, he got a grant to purchase this massive pump for Osmer's Management. I believe it was a $30,000 Dutch pump. And worked with Bob and Nick and pumped the pond down as far as they could get it. And we worked with DEC to try to net them out as best as possible, rectifish them out. But at the end of the day, all that work couldn't get them all out. So there was discussions about, do we want to rope on the pond and get rid of everything that's in there? And that's a whole process, and we decided against it. But there still is no quick answer to that. So we're keeping an eye on it, working on it. But yeah, in terms of the outreach, I'm working with Tony Hall just to bring some public attention to it. Hey, when your kid goes off to college, don't dump your goldfish into your pond or into the stream, because things like that can happen. And they can ultimately be a huge problem for Lake George. So, yeah, little things.
It just so happens that day I called you and you said, I can't talk to you very long. I got my waders on. I'm hunting goldfish.
Yeah.
Okay, Dave, I'm going to just hang up. Forget whatever I want to talk about. You're nowhere near as exciting. Any other comments? Any other motions to be made? Did I hear a motion to adjourn somewhere?
That's what I think he
Am I
said.
hearing it?
Second.
Did I hear a second?
Yeah, second.
Carried.
Oh, take your vote. Say all in favor.
I did. Silent vote. All in favor, say aye.
Take care.
Council is
Hopefully I'll
fairly
have all kinds
correct
of
this
good
week.
stuff to